The arrival at Earth Station 9. The alien cruiser descended slowly into orbit around the blue and green planet known as Earth. The students on board, all from different corners of the galaxy, leaned against the glass watching the surface of the planet. Spinning beneath them, they had trained for this moment for years at the Galactic Peace Academy. Now they had finally come face to face with the world they had studied from afar and joked about in the halls of the Academy. This was the Deathworld. The place where weather could kill in minutes, where animals had venom stronger than plasma and were the dominant species. Humans were known not for strength or speed, but for madness, adaptability, and willpower. There were 7 alien students in total, each from a species that had never visited Earth before. They were young, proud, and ready to prove their skills. Threx from the Silicarn Empire thought Earth was just propaganda, a trick to make humans seem more dangerous than they really were. Lyrian of the feathered Vortha species believed the term Deathworld was an insult meant to scare off explorers. Zal from the shadowy Norvex clan said that any world with oxygen was already primitive, and nothing could surprise them anymore. The shuttle docked with Earth Station 9, a floating research facility. Built by humans for visiting scholars, it was old, rusty, and simple, which made some of the students scoff, but the human greeter, a short woman with sunburned skin and calm eyes, welcomed them with no sign of fear or awe. She handed out small translation chips and said in a flat tone, "Welcome to orbit above Earth. Do not go near the viewing deck during storms, and please keep panic attacks to a minimum. We only have one doctor this month." The students laughed, thinking it was a joke. That night, as they settled into their bunks, the walls trembled suddenly, and a loud alarm blared through. The station lights flickered, the oxygen vents shut down for exactly 47 seconds. Temperature dropped hard enough to fog their breath in moments. Several students panicked, thinking they were under attack. Threx shouted at the console, trying to contact control, but no signal came. Lyrian began to shiver despite her thermal feathers. The room became darker as backup power failed, and then all at once it was silent again. A small light appeared near the emergency door. It was a human figure, short and dressed in a grease-stained suit, holding an old toolbox. The human looked at them without saying a word and walked past them to the main control panel. He opened it, adjusted 3 wires, hit it once with the palm of his hand, and suddenly everything came back to life. Lights, vents, warmth, power, even the comms flickered back on. The students stared, frozen, as the human looked over his shoulder and said calmly, "Just a power surge, nothing to cry about. It happens when solar flares play games with our shielding system." Then he smiled, not in arrogance, but like someone used to disasters, and walked out the door, humming a strange Earth tune. The students did not laugh this time. The next day, they were given Earth suits and briefed by their human instructor, an old man with a metal leg and one eye who introduced himself only as Instructor Ray. He did not use grand words or speak of glory. He simply pulled down a projector screen and showed footage of Earth storms, floods, fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, and then footage of humans walking into those things, not to fight but to rescue others. The room became quiet as the instructor said, "This planet does not care who you are. It will test you, and if you do not learn to listen, it will crush you like a glass cup under a gravity booth." Then handed each student a field manual titled "How Not to Die on Earth Volume 1, and sent them off for simulation prep. That evening, the students walked past the janitor again, the same man who fixed the power last night. He was on his knees repairing a floor vent quietly with a small old tool. None of the aliens said anything, but they all slowed down and glanced at him, this time a little longer than before. One of them, Zal, looked like he wanted to speak, but instead kept walking in silence. Back in the dorm, Threx sat down slowly and whispered to Lyrian, who was still drying her feathers from the ice burst earlier, "Maybe this place is not an exaggeration. Maybe this really is a death world." Lyrian gave no reply, just stared at the small earth flower she had picked from the station hydro room earlier. That flower had burned her fingers slightly when touched, and she still did not understand why. Stars moved slowly outside the station windows. The planet turned endlessly below, and the students tried to sleep unsure whether the coming tests would be simulations or reality, because now they began to feel something strange crawling at the edge of their minds. A whisper not of fear but of respect, the kind of respect that grows when the air itself dares you to breathe. The test begins. The alien students woke early feeling uneasy, their bodies still not used to Earth's strange atmosphere, but excitement pushed them forward. They were told today was the first real test survival in the jungle zone. Deep inside Earth's controlled environment, the place was designed to mimic the planet's deadliest forests, filled with sharp plants, strange insects, and animals that adapted quickly to everything. The students thought it would be easy, but they were wrong. Instructor Ray stood before them in his worn-out jacket, his metal leg tapping softly on the ground. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and full of knowledge. He handed out Earth survival kits with simple tools, a small knife, a water filter, and a communicator. The students looked at the gear as if it was useless, but Ray said, "These are all you need if you can use your mind and body well. The jungle will teach the rest." Students were divided into two groups. Each group was dropped in a different part of the jungle, with drones hovering silently above to watch. Every step was recorded, every sound captured. The students felt like prey, but they tried to hide it. Threx led one group and boasted that nothing could surprise him. But Lyrian and the other group kept quiet, watching the trees carefully. As they stepped into the jungle, the air changed, thick and humid, filled with sounds of unseen creatures. Somewhere a sharp scream echoed like a warning. The ground was soft and slippery, covered in strange moss and roots. The plants seemed to move slightly as if watching them, but when the students tried to get closer, the leaves stopped. The jungle was alive in a way no alien had ever felt before. After an hour, Threx's group encountered their first challenge. A pack of strange creatures with glowing eyes and thick scales appeared, blocking their path. They moved fast and attacked with sudden bursts of speed and venomous bites. The aliens tried to fight back, but the creatures disappeared into the thick fog and reappeared behind them. The students barely escaped with scratches and bruises, but Threx refused to admit defeat. He gritted his teeth and said this was only a warm-up. Meanwhile, Lyrian's group faced another problem. A fast-moving storm swept through the area without warning. The rain fell hard like needles and thunder shook the trees. The group scrambled for shelter, but the storm lasted too long. The drones lost contact for several minutes, and the students worried they were lost. The cold bit through their skin, and the ground turned into mud traps. The storm was a test of endurance and patience, not strength. Back at the station, Instructor Ray watched the monitors carefully. His face was unreadable, but inside he worried the students were underestimating Earth's dangers, but he knew they would learn soon enough. One thing that surprised him was how calm the human rescue teams were whenever they got emergency calls from the jungle. The teams moved quickly, fearless, and seemed to understand the jungle like it was their home. That night, the alien students gathered around a small fire, trying to dry their clothes and share stories. Threx bragged about his close fights and near kills, but Lyrian was silent, thinking about the strange plants and animals. She saw the janitor who fixed the power was there too. He sat quietly, repairing his old tools and listening. The students noticed how calm he was, as if he belonged to this wild world. Suddenly, one of the smaller drones crashed nearby, sending sparks into the air. The students jumped, but the janitor walked calmly to the wreckage. He pulled out a small toolkit and began fixing the drone with steady hands, without fear. The students watched amazed. He talked softly to the drone like a friend, and soon it was buzzing again. The janitor smiled and said, "This jungle does not forgive mistakes, but it teaches those who listen." The students started to see a new side of humans. The janitor was not just a simple worker, he was a survivor, a part of the Deathworld itself. The students felt a mix of fear and respect growing inside them. The jungle was no longer a place to conquer, but a place to understand. They realized Earth was more than just a dangerous planet. It was a challenge that shaped the creatures who lived on it. As the fire burned low, the students prepared for the next day, their minds filled with questions. What else would the jungle throw at them? Could they survive longer than a week? Would they ever understand humans who walked these forests as if they were their own bodies? The stars shone bright above, but below the jungle whispered secrets only the brave could hear. The night passed slowly, and when dawn came, the students faced a new day, but deep inside they knew the real test was only beginning. Earth had more dangers, more mysteries, and more lessons to teach. They were no longer just alien students. They were learners in a world where only the strong and smart survived. The human child in the wild. The jungle grew thicker and darker as the alien students moved. Carefully through the trees, Lyrian had separated from her group, searching for a broken drone that had fallen. Deep into the brush, she was nervous but curious. She wanted to prove she could survive alone on this death world. Her steps were soft, but every sound seemed loud in the silent green wilderness. Suddenly she heard a faint rustle near Lyrian, froze her eyes scanning the shadows. Then she saw a small figure moving quickly between the trees. It was a human child no more than 8 years old. He wore ragged clothes and carried a handmade spear. He did not seem afraid of her at all. Instead, he smiled slightly and motioned her to follow. He said in simple words, "I live here. I know the jungle. Well, you can come with me if you want." The child introduced himself as Kian. His eyes were bright and his skin was dark from the sun. He told Lyrian that his parents had died in a storm months ago, and since then he had learned to live alone in the jungle. He built traps to catch small animals and ate insects and berries. He showed her how to find clean water by watching where birds flew. He even taught her how to avoid the venomous snakes that slithered silently beneath the leaves. Lyrian was amazed by his calmness and strength. She had read about humans, but seeing this child survive in a place that had already scared her made her heart beat faster. She watched as Kian moved through the jungle like a shadow blending with the trees. He did not carry the expensive gear the students had, but he seemed to have everything he needed inside his mind and body. One day a large predator appeared nearby, a massive beast with sharp claws and eyes that burned red. Kian did not panic. He whispered to Lyrian to stay still and slowly pulled out a small fire starter. He struck it against a rock and flames sparked to life, quickly growing into a small fire. The beast growled, but it kept its distance, afraid of the fire's power. The child smiled and said, "Fire is the oldest friend of humans. It keeps us alive and safe in this world." Lyrian felt a mix of fear and respect. The child taught her that humans were born into survival, not trained like the alien students. She realized that this was the true meaning of the death world. Earth did not only have dangerous creatures, but it also created creatures strong enough to face them without fear. The jungle had shaped Kian just as much as it shaped the beasts that roamed it. As days passed, Lyrian stayed with Kian, learning his ways. She saw him solve problems, quickly build shelter from leaves and branches, and listen to the sounds of the forest to predict rain or danger. The alien students back at the station thought their training was tough, but here was a child living every moment on the edge of death, and yet he smiled. Every morning, ready for the fight. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the child told Lyrian stories of humans who could run faster than animals, jump higher than trees, and heal wounds that should have killed them. He spoke of a strange power called willpower that could push humans beyond their limits and make them monsters on the battlefield and heroes in times of peace. Lyrian wondered if this power was what made humans so feared and respected in the galaxy. But not everything was easy. Kian showed scars on his arms and told her of nights when cold winds howled and food was scarce. He talked about loneliness and pain, but said it was part of the game. The death world did not give second chances. It took everything if you were weak and gave nothing back without a fight. Lyrian understood now why humans laughed in the face of danger and kept moving forward no matter what. When Lyrian finally returned to the station, she was different. Her eyes held a new fire and respect for the planet and its strange inhabitants. She could no longer see Earth as just a dangerous place. She knew it was a school, a harsh master teaching every living thing to be fierce and smart. The child had opened her eyes to a truth that no book or lecture could explain. Back at the station, the other students listened to her stories in silence. Some were shocked. Others confused, but all felt the weight of what she said. The jungle was not just a test, it was a teacher, and humans were its best students. The alien students began to question everything they thought they knew about this death world. The days ahead promised more challenges and mysteries. Earth was not done with them yet, but now the students had a new understanding. They were not just visitors, they were learners trying to survive in a world that had already mastered survival itself. The real adventure was just beginning. Firestorm at base camp. The sky above the jungle was clear when the alien students returned to base camp. They were tired but proud. They had survived more than they expected. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and leaves. The sun was warm on their backs, but they did not notice because something felt wrong. The wind began to change, moving faster and hotter, like a warning they could not ignore. Instructor Ray was already outside the camp. He looked up at the sky with a serious face and shouted, "Everyone get ready, a firestorm is coming." The students scrambled to secure their gear and prepare for evacuation, but the fire came faster than anyone imagined. A wall of bright orange and black smoke rushed toward the camp, engulfing everything in its path. The drones above tried to monitor the fire, but the thick smoke blocked their sensors and signals went down. The students panicked. They had never seen fire move this fast on any planet. It was like the jungle itself was alive, breathing fire and destruction. They ran trying to find safe ground, but the flames chased them, cutting off their path. Lyrian held tight to her water filter as the heat scorched her skin. Threk shouted orders, but his voice was lost in the roar of the fire. The trees cracked and fell around them. The ground shook from the heat waves. The jungle was turning into a blazing inferno, and the alien students were trapped inside. Suddenly, a figure appeared running through the smoke and flames without any gear or protection. It was a human survival expert, a man known as Jake from the local rescue team. His face was calm, focused, like he was born for moments like this. He shouted to the students, "Follow me," and started carrying two exhausted aliens on his shoulders as he moved swiftly through the fire. The students stared in disbelief as Jake walked without fear through the burning jungle, stepping over fallen trees and leaping over fiery pits. He never hesitated or slowed down, his breath steady and eyes locked on safety. Aliens who saw him felt something deep inside them change. They realized humans were not just survivors. They were warriors of the death world, and by one, Jake saved the stranded students, pulling them out of danger and guiding them to a river where the fire could not reach. The water was cold and fast, but it was their only refuge. The students shivered as they soaked themselves and watched the fire rage behind them. They could hear the crackling and screams of animals trapped inside the blaze. When all the students were safe, Jake sat with them quietly, his face covered in soot, but his eyes shining with determination. He told them stories of his team, how they trained all year to face disasters, how they lost friends, but never gave up, how Earth was a place where only the strong and smart survived. Students listened in silence. Some of them wiped tears from their eyes. They had never seen such courage, such sacrifice, and calm in the face of death. The firestorm was more than a test. It was a lesson in the real power of humans and their bond with this brutal planet. That night back at the station, the students gathered around the fire again, but this time their voices were softer, their laughter gone, replaced by respect and awe. They talked about Jake and the human rescue teams who risked their lives daily. They wondered how humans could face such horrors and still find hope and kindness in their hearts. Threx admitted that Earth was not just a dangerous world. It was a crucible that shaped humans into monsters in war and gods in rescue. The jungle had burned many things away, but it had also forged something unbreakable inside every person who called Earth home. The janitor who fixed the power and the broken drones sat with them, quietly nodding. He did not say much, but his presence was enough to remind them that humans came from this fierce planet and carried its spirit in every step. As the firestorm faded and the smoke cleared, the students looked at the jungle differently. The death world was alive, more alive than they had imagined, and humans were the strange creatures who had learned to dance with its Flames without fear, the lessons of survival, were harsh, but they were real, and soon they would face even darker challenges ahead. Jungle whispered at night as the stars blinked above the students, dreamed of fire shadows and the small human who had saved them all from death. They were no longer just students. They were part of Earth's story now, whether they wanted it or not. What lies beneath Antarctica? The alien students were brought to a new place colder and darker than the jungle. This was a secret underground human research facility, hidden beneath the thick ice of Antarctica. The walls were cold metal and glass, and the air smelled like machines and chemicals. Instructor Ray led them quietly, explaining this was their final test. The scientists here had discovered an ancient organism frozen for thousands of years. But something went wrong. The students walked through the silent halls, feeling uneasy. They could see strange equipment and read strange symbols. Humans in white suits moved quickly around them, their faces serious but calm. Suddenly alarms blared and the lights flickered. The frozen organism had begun to thaw and stir. The students were rushed into a secure. Back in the cold halls, the alien commander gathered the students. He told them the truth about Earth and its people. Earth was not just a dangerous planet. Earth was a death world because it forced every living thing to become stronger, smarter, and more ruthless. Humans were the result of millions of years of fighting disease, climate, predators, and each other. They had become the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Some students cried, others refused to believe, but none could deny the facts. One student tried to challenge a human soldier nearby and was knocked out with a single punch. The room fell silent as the soldier helped him up and said, "This planet makes us what we are. You either adapt or you die." The alien students looked at Earth with new eyes. They no longer saw a wild, primitive planet, but a forge where monsters were born. Monsters who chose to protect their home rather than destroy it. The Deathworld was a teacher, and humans its fiercest students. They understood now why humans were feared and respected across the stars. As they prepared to leave Antarctica, the students thought about their journey. The tests, the fire, the child in the jungle, and the frozen monster. They felt changed not just in body but in spirit. Earth had shown them its power and they had survived, but they knew their lessons were only beginning. The Deathworld was alive and waiting. The stars outside the cold facility shone bright and distant. But the students felt a fire inside themselves burning stronger than ever. They were no longer just alien students. They were part of a story much bigger than themselves. A story of survival, strength, and the true meaning of life on Earth. The Deathworld. Truth. The alien students gathered in the cold briefing room, their faces pale and their eyes heavy with all they had seen. The alien commander stood before them, his voice steady and serious. He told them a truth they had not wanted to hear. Earth was not a death world because humans were monsters, but because the planet itself was a brutal teacher. The forces of nature here pushed every living thing to its limits. Every storm, every predator, every disease was a test designed to weed out the weak and reward the strong. He explained that Earth's seasons were harsh and unpredictable. The jungles burned, the oceans roared, and the skies unleashed lightning that could split mountains. The planet was a battleground where life fought for survival every second, but what made Earth unique was its ability to create creatures that could fight back with an unmatched ferocity. Humans were the latest and most dangerous result of this endless struggle. A species born from fire, ice, and war. Some students struggled to accept this. Their minds could not understand how a planet could shape life so fiercely. Others were afraid, realizing that Earth was not just a place to visit, but a world that demanded respect and fear. One student tried to challenge a human soldier standing quietly in the corner, but with one swift punch, the alien fell to the ground stunned. The soldier looked down at him and said, "This world shapes us into monsters, but we learned to use that power to protect, not destroy." The commander nodded and said, "Humans are not just survivors. They are fighters born of a planet that refuses to give up. Earth does not care about peace or war. It only cares about life continuing and adapting. It created humans to be the perfect warriors for survival and the perfect caretakers for its future. The students listened as the commander spoke about the sacrifices humans made, how generations had fought to tame the planet, not by conquering, but by learning how to live with its dangers. They heard stories of people who faced floods, earthquakes, wildfires, and still rebuilt homes. Families, communities. Humans had learned that true strength was in unity, willpower, and the refusal to surrender no matter the cost. Room was silent, except for the soft hum of machines outside. The alien students felt a deep respect growing inside them, mixed with fear of what they had yet to understand. They realized Earth was not just a challenge, it was a crucible that tested the soul as much as the body. They wondered if they could ever survive such harsh lessons outside. The windows, the jungle stretched endlessly, and the cold wind whispered secrets of the Deathworld. The students looked at each other, knowing that their journey was about to end, but their real understanding had just begun. They were no longer outsiders. They had become part of the story of Earth, a story of monsters forged in fire and hope. The janitor who fixed the power and the rescue expert Jake stood among them. Quietly, their presence a reminder that humans carried the spirit of this death world within every scar, every smile, every step they took. The alien students understood now that Earth was more than just a dangerous place. It was a home for those willing to fight for survival and protect what they loved. The commander ended the briefing saying, "Remember this. Earth will never be easy, but it will always make you stronger. You came here as students, but you will leave as changed beings with a new respect for life and for the monsters who walk this planet." The students nodded their heads, their hearts heavy, but filled with a new strength. The Deathworld had revealed its truth, and they had no choice but to accept it. Graduation and the final lesson. Day had come for the alien students to leave Earth behind. They stood together on the platform of Earth Station 9, their faces showing a mix of relief, respect, and sorrow. They were no longer the same beings who had arrived full of pride and doubt. Now they carried the weight of knowledge and experience that only a Deathworld could give them. The human instructors had stood silently watching the group, no longer the strangers they had been, but mentors and protectors. The janitor who had fixed the power and saved them all from darkness stepped forward, his eyes calm and knowing. He spoke softly in a voice that carried the weight of Earth itself. He said, "The real danger is not Earth or humans. The real danger is what happens when someone sees this planet and still chooses war without understanding, chooses destruction without mercy. Earth is a teacher and a protector. We are its children, and our strength is its gift." Students listened carefully. They remembered the firestorms, the jungle, the frozen monsters, and most of all the small human child who had taught them what survival truly meant. The child had been Earth's secret, a reminder that strength was born from hardship, and hope that even in the darkest places life found a way. One student stepped forward and asked, "What will happen to Earth now? Will it always be a death world?" The janitor smiled and said, "Earth will always challenge those who live here, but it is not just a world of death. It is a world of life, of endless battles and endless victories. It is a place where monsters choose to protect their home instead of destroy it." The students felt a deep change within themselves. They knew they had been tested by the fiercest teacher the universe had to offer. They knew they could never forget the lessons learned here. The planet had shaped them as much as they had tried to study it. The Deathworld had become part of their story, their souls forever marked by its fire and ice. As the shuttle lifted off, the students looked back at the swirling blue and green sphere below. They understood that Earth was more than a planet. It was a crucible of survival, a place where life was hard but beautiful, where monsters walked not to conquer but to protect. They carried with them a new respect for humanity, a respect born from the fires of hardship and the quiet strength of those who never gave up. The Deathworld had shown them what it truly meant to be alive, to fight, and to protect what matters most. The stars stretched out before them, endless and mysterious, but none were as fierce as Earth. None had created warriors like humans. None had taught lessons so deep and raw. The alien students knew their journey was ending, but their understanding had only begun. They were no longer just students. They were guardians of a truth few would believe and many would fear. The truth that Earth was not just a death world, but a home for monsters with hearts strong enough to love and protect the fragile beauty of life. Graduation and the final lesson. Day of departure arrived, and the alien students gathered at Earth Station 9. Their faces were a mix of exhaustion, pride, and deep respect. They no longer carried the arrogance of newcomers, but the humility of those who had faced a planet that would break most spirits and build stronger ones. The human instructors stood quietly watching their progress. The janitor, who once saved them from darkness, stepped forward, his eyes calm as the endless sky. He spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of Earth itself. The real danger is not this planet or its people, but what happens when someone sees Earth and chooses war without understanding, chooses destruction without mercy. Earth is a teacher and a guardian. We are its children, and its strength flows through us. The students remembered every test, every fire, every frozen monster, and most of all the small human child who had shown them. Survival was not about gear or technology, but about heart and will. The child was Earth's secret, a living proof that even in the harshest places, life fought back with hope. One student asked, "Will Earth always be a death world?" The janitor smiled gently and said, "Earth will always challenge those who live here, but it is more than death. It is a world of life, endless battles and endless victories, where monsters choose to protect their home rather than destroy it." As the shuttle lifted off, the students looked back at the blue-green world swirling beneath them. They knew Earth was not just a planet but a crucible, where survival forged warriors with hearts fierce enough to love and protect. The stars stretched before them, endless and mysterious, but none burned as bright or as fierce as Earth. Their journey was ending, but their understanding had only just begun. They were no longer students, but guardians of a truth few would dare to believe. Earth was not just a death world, but a home for monsters with souls strong enough to protect the fragile beauty of life. The end.